Hi, I'm Karen Beach with the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library Foundation, and thanks to everyone for joining us for tonight's Final Draft Home Edition. We're so excited that you are joining us. This is I think, our fifth episode of trying out Final Draft online. So we hope you're having fun with us as we're having fun bringing you authors to your living room over these next few weeks while we're all staying safe and at home. We hope this is a fun little break in your week. It certainly is fun for us. Tonight, our guest is New York Times bestselling author Brendan Reichs. He's the author of both young adult and some middle grade books. So he's our first young adult author that we've had as part of our Final Draft series. I know a lot of adults really enjoy reading young adult fiction, myself included. Would love to know, however, if we have any students online with us this evening. So make sure to drop us some comments below. Let us know that you're here. Also questions that you have for Brendan, and we will get to those in a few minutes. If you're of the right age, we hope you've stopped by our good friend, Town Brewing tonight. Before we got started here with Final Draft, or maybe you'll stop by later this week. Town Brewing is normally our location for Final Draft when we're able to be together, and we can't wait to be back to Town Brewing sometime, hopefully in the near future. We'll be bringing back Final Draft to you live, but in the meantime, we hope you'll check them out and stop by for a growler or a bite to eat. Also, just a quick little shout out to Park Road Books and Main Street Books. While we're all at home and hopefully having more time to read, both of those bookstores are on hand to sell you Brendan's books, and they'll ship those to your home. And then also, don't forget that you can check out the library's website, cmlibrary.org, and you can look for ebook copies, a digital download of many of Brendan's books that we're going to talk to you about tonight. So just quickly, we'll jump in and get started. I want to introduce Brendan to you. He was actually born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. Fun fact, Brendan, I was as well, so we might chat about that a little bit. Brendan graduated from South Meck High School, also went to Wake Forest University, and then on to George Washington University School of Law. He is following a string of authors that we've had on recently who've been lawyers and now writers, and we might chat about that a little bit too. He's the co-author of the Viral series for young adults, author of the Project Nemesis series, which was an instant New York Times bestseller. Congrats. And co-author of the new Darkdeep series for middle grade students. He's also on the executive board of YALLFEST and YALLWEST, which is a young adult literary festival, now in 2 different locations. So he is busy. He's been a favorite guest author of the library's Epic Fest in years past. And so we're delighted to welcome Brendan Reichs tonight to Final Draft Home Edition. And Brendan, I hope you'll tell us a little bit about why you moved from being a lawyer to being a writer, because there seems to be some kind of common thread there for several of our authors that we've had on recently. And then also, why young adult fiction for you? So welcome, Brendan.
Hey everybody, welcome into my home, my writing studio, where all the magic happens. Couple explanations first. So when I was getting ready for this, I was like, I'm gonna be on a live stream and people are gonna be seeing me. Like, should I actually shave and break the quarantine beard that I've been sculpting for the last 4 weeks? And I elected to. Not only would I not shave, but I would not groom the beard either, because that's sort of been my motive here, is to see like how much of like a hobo I can truly become since I can't leave the house. Now, writers don't leave the house anyway, so we're natural quarantine beasts. But I just decided that, I would give you a real look into the real life of what I've been doing as I stare at a computer and do nothing for weeks on end, which is not remarkably different from my current life. So the key is to grow it on the neck. You don't want to lose that, because that's where the warmth layer, the comfort layer is. So this is a lot of fun. I'm really glad the library invited me. I guess I can get to the question you asked. A lot of people ask like why there's so many authors that were lawyers, and it's because being a lawyer is terrible. It's a terrible soul-sucking job in which anyone who has the ability to flee does. And so that's what I did. I always thought that I wanted to be a lawyer. That's sort of growing up. I like to argue a lot, and I always thought I was right. And so it seems like a natural fit as a career. And so I kind of made the mistake I think that a lot of people do, and then I never at any point from age 16 until probably age 28 ever asked myself what it is I actually enjoy doing. So when I speak to kids, and if there's some out there now, I'm going to give you a little bit of my PSA. It's like, just sit back for one day, for 30 seconds, just be like, what do I like to do? Because that's what you should do for a job. Because if you don't, you'll end up doing something like I did, which is go to law school to pursue a job that you did not want just because you thought it was sort of the right thing to do and it was prestigious and people would respect you and you'd make money, except for you didn't enjoy it at all. And so I actually never had that epiphany. So, kids, PSA, just ask yourself, what do you want to do for a living? Because your job ends up being what you do every day. And if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to be very happy. So, it's important to get that right. But so I am from Charlotte. I went to Myers Park Traditional Elementary School. I went to Carmel Junior High back when we still had junior highs. And then I did graduate from high school from South Mecklenburg, South Meck High School, Redneck Tech, go Sabres. And at that point, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I really liked Tim Duncan. So I decided to go to Wake Forest University. And I love that. It was a lot of fun. It's a great school. It's got a really unique character. I realized pretty quickly I was a small school kind of personality. So it was a good fit for me. And I went there for 4 years. I'm a tragic fan of their basketball team, which disappoints probably more than any single institution in the history of the United States. But I graduated, and there I studied history because that's what I liked. And so at that point, I was like, didn't really matter what I'm going to major in because I'm going to go to law school, so I'm going to major in what I want. So I was on the right track there. So I was a history major, but when you graduate, it's not like there's a giant history factory downtown that you go get a job at. So I didn't know what to do. So I did what many people do who, again, given no thought to what they want to do for a living. I went to law school because law school seems like a good idea. It's like kicking the can down the road for 3 years, and I would do that, and then I'd come out and be a lawyer or something. So I did, and I went to law school. I went to the George Washington University School of Law, and I really, really, really liked law school. I have a lot of great friends from there. Some just good times. It's a fun city to live in DC. It was a pretty wild time. I was there from 2000 to about 2006 overall. So we had some incredible times. We had 9/11 take place. We had the sniper take place. We had the anthrax scare in the metro. So it was a wild time to live in DC. But I really liked law school. The problem is once you graduate law school, they generally expect you to be a lawyer, and that's where it all fell apart for me. I got a great job with a wonderful firm in Charlotte with good people, and through no fault of their own, did not enjoy the work. I found myself working 80-hour weeks on things I didn't enjoy, and I quickly realized that I wanted to change. And so I got kind of weird with it. At one point, I was just in my office and I just started freaking out in the chair. I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to die in this office. I'm going to die sitting in this chair. And one of the other associates quietly closed my door and says, okay, you need to calm down. And I did. And I just started looking for other work. And so I applied to the FBI, the Foreign Service. I applied to the CIA. I was like, I will literally murder people in foreign countries for you if I don't have to be a lawyer anymore. And they did not reply to my application. But it was also about this time that I realized I really, really liked writing. I'd always been a huge reader. Like I was an epic fantasy reader from the time I can remember the ability to read. And I sort of came up with this idea based on another piece of work you might be familiar with, which is the Temperance Brennan books or the TV show Bones. And the idea was Virals. And Virals is essentially a spinoff from the TV show Bones. It's a young version of Temperance Brennan named Tori Brennan, and she solves forensic mysteries with her friends in Charleston, South Carolina, but with a supernatural twist. They catch a super virus from this dog, and it mangles their DNA and gives them super sensory capabilities. Now, I thought this would be a good idea as just generally a product, but I didn't actually even come up with the idea to write it myself. Now, there's another person involved in this project. Her name is Kathy Reichs, Dr. Kathy Reichs, no relation, except for she is my mommy. And I sort of pitched this idea. I was like, what about this thing? Do you think it's a good idea? And she got on board with it. And so we pitched it to an agent, and they're at first like, this is great. We love it. Just add a vampire. And we were both like, wait, huh? Vampire? And they're like, you gotta remember, it's like 2008. If vampires were big, Twilight was pretty big. And so we were like, we don't want to do that. They're like, or a zombie, whatever. And so we sort of hatched this idea of a Bones-like series of forensic mysteries in high school with a twist of this supernatural disease that they catch from a dog. And that worked. And the Viral series ended up being 5 full books. I think I said originally I already that I wasn't even planning on writing it. My original plan was to actually just manage the series and have another writer do it. And then I would write, and I was like, oh, give me time to write my own book. And then somebody, I believe it was my mother's agent, cut through the fat and was like, or you could write this book. And I was like, huh. So it was kind of a weird way to get into kid lit, but I've found that I love it. I love writing for teens and young adults. Immediately, it was a perfect fit for me. It suits my personality and my maturity level. I really like dealing with high school students. I love going to schools. I love going to festivals. That's why I'm on the board of two, the first two ever large scale young adult and middle grade only festivals, YALLFEST and YALLWEST. YALLWEST has been canceled this year. It was going to be in late April, but it will be reborn online as Y'all Stay Home on April 25th. So if you're looking for free content, we're doing the entire festival online, panels with everyone. We'll have 40 to 50 New York Times bestselling authors in kidlit. So we encourage you to go to the YALLWEST.org website and log on for that later this month. I believe it is April 26th. So that's a long-winded story where I've ended up writing the books, and I worked with them. Kathy and I wrote them together. I call her Kathy. That's my mom. Again, I call her Kathy professionally because it's weird to say, yeah, mom and I wrote the books, but it's my mom. But we wrote them together. She was my first editor. She's super mean and not easy to work with, but very, very good at her job. She could work on being a nicer mom to her son who's trying a new endeavor, but overall acceptable. She was an acceptable person to work with.
Brendan, I should jump in here really quickly and just let you know. I don't know if you know or not, but I think I saw that your mom is watching tonight. So if you want to give a shout out to your mom too, maybe,
Yeah, no, she's
nice
watching.
thing.
My sister actually just flashed, what is that on your face? And I don't know what's on my face. That is my face. Why would you do that, Carrie? We're live on TV. All right. So virals ended, and I needed to do a thing that was on my own. I obviously had to do a project next that was just going to be me. And I'd had this idea brewing for a couple years, and it ended up being the book Nemesis. And Nemesis is about a girl who's 16 who has a very unique problem that every 2 years on her birthday, a man in a black suit comes and murders her. Except for she doesn't die like a normal person. Instead, she wakes up a couple hours later in a field outside of her small Idaho hometown without a mark on her, and all evidence of the crime has been erased. So it's a wild series, and as she investigates this, she comes to realize that her entire class in her hometown may be the center of a large government conspiracy which may implicate all life on Earth. And it just gets weirder from that. There's an asteroid involved, and it did well. I was pleased it came out, and it did make the New York Times list, which was extremely gratifying for me. And it has 2 sequels, Genesis and Chrysalis. Naming these books was a pretty funny endeavor because the first 2 just sort of were automatic, like, oh, Nemesis, it fits everything about the book. And Genesis makes sense once you get there in the series. But then we had to get a 3rd title. So we're like, Nemesis, Genesis. You'd think there's just the perfect word that's 7 letters and ends in cis, but turns out it's not. It took me forever, like months. I was going through titles that I knew weren't going to work. I knew I couldn't call it syphilis. I knew I couldn't call it many other things that were the right cadence. So we ended up with finally landing on Chrysalis, which is the right thing to do. It was the right for the series. So that was fun. But that has been 3 books. It's now a complete series. And so during this time, I realized that, as I said, I was a history major, went to law school. I'd never taken a single class in creative writing, not one single course at any level in my life. And I realized that there was so much about writing that I felt like I knew instinctively, but I didn't know like completely. And I wanted to sort of learn the actual craft. And so I went and got a master's in fine arts for creative writing for children and young adults at the Vermont College of Fine Arts, which is a fantastic place to go if you're interested in creative writing. And I finally got to learn craft, and that was just an amazing experience. And one of my good friends, an author named Ally Condie, also was doing the same thing. And we actually caught a little flack when we were out there because people were like, you guys are published authors, you have bestsellers. Why in the world did you go back to get a degree that many people thought was really for the job that you already have? But I don't think in those terms. I don't think there's any writer on the planet who can't get better. And that's how I felt about my own work. And I was really pleased with the level of instruction and how much better my work got as I worked there. But eventually they give you degrees and tell you to go home. You're not allowed back. And they actually say that, like, please don't come back here. You've graduated. You're done. Go away. So we wanted to do a project together, Ally and I, because we thought it was a lot of fun. So we decided to come up with a series of our own, and we came up with the Darkdeep series. And that is about 4 kids who live in a small town in the Pacific Northwest. And this is for middle grade readers. We went to a different age group because we wanted to write for a younger audience. And they discover a dark secret hiding in a place called Still Cove. And there's this houseboat on a lake there that no one's been going to. It's clearly abandoned. And as they go down to a hidden lower level, they discover that it in fact has this well in the bottom of the boat, and they don't understand it because that should sink the boat, but it doesn't. In fact, it's black, it's water, it swirls constantly, even though there's no wind. They can't figure it out, so they call it the Darkdeep. And eventually, one of the characters foolishly decides she should stick her foot inside the Darkdeep and falls through it, and they find out what it does, which is when you enter the Darkdeep, it scans your mind, and whatever you're thinking of comes alive with you on this island that they find the boat on. For a short period of time. So we called them figments, as in figments of your imagination. So they're interacting with all these fun things, and it's great. And they're like, oh, this is amazing. We can imagine things to life. But then they quickly realize that it's not just scanning the cool things, it's also scanning the back parts of their mind, their deepest, darkest fears. And those things start to appear on the island with them. And suddenly the figments are getting more and more real, and they're getting dangerous, and they can't control them. They start to leave the island, and they realize they may have started something that may destroy their town and let loose an evil on the world, and they have to figure out how to shut it down. So that's the Darkdeep series. It's been a lot of fun. It's with Bloomsbury Publishing, and we've had tremendous success so far with it. The second book, The Beast, came out last year in October, and the third book we just finished. Final copy edits actually very, very recently. It's called The Torchbearers, and that will be out this October. So those are the book series that I've written so far. I have a few projects that I'm in the works or trying to get started, but I can't speak on those yet. But that's sort of been my publishing career. It's been a decade. It's been a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed working with the people that I've met. I think it's a really fun community to work with in terms of kidlit. Like, we have a lot of great authors in town. You should check out books by Renee Adier and Carrie Ryan, Megan Miranda. They're all local Charlotte authors who have wonderful kidlit titles that would be great for any age group. And you'd be surprised how many adults read young adult and middle grade. About 50% of readers of young adult and kidlit are in fact adults. And so there's no shame if you want to go for a largely plot-based book about a young person experiencing something from the first time. That's pretty much all young adult is. So that's sort of been my writer's journey. And I think I was asked a little bit about my process, but I didn't know if somebody wanted to jump in or if I should just keep.
So Brendan, we've gotten some questions, including a little bit about your process. And I want to say, first of all, I am so glad. I mean, I'm sure you were a great lawyer, but I'm so glad you made the switch to being an author. I did read the Virals and really enjoyed that. And I have not read Darkdeep, but you've intrigued me with that. So I think I'm going to have to download that from our library and give that a read while I'm here at home, because that sounds like a lot of fun. So I got some questions for you, including a little bit about your process. So what's your writing day kind of like? And I know, because you and I have chatted about this before, that you have a particular kind of process and structure that you use. And if our technology works, right, we're going to try to show a picture of this.
Yeah, so a particular is a good way to describe it. So I have been described as a organizational freak. I actually give lectures on this. I've done it at several writing conferences, and I've taught it in a few different symposiums and things like that. But basically, I take outlining to the largest extreme possible. I not only outline a book start to finish before I write a single word, where I've summarized every single chapter before I write, I also now splash the entire book across a whiteboard. And so what you're looking at is my planning process from start to finish. Now, this is all done before I write a word of a book. And so what you're looking at is basically me breaking this book into 4 parts. Each part has 8 chapters. And on each little section there, you see my chapter summary and a color-coded card. I actually print those out, cut them with scissors and tape them, and then tape them to the board because I'm psychotic. And then underneath, you'll just see magnets that I created by hand at great expense and personal peril. Turns out you can't just buy one magnet. You have to buy somehow a set of magnets, but they're very expensive. But there's a loophole. If you buy magnetic business cards from any major company, they'll put whatever you want on them. So I put a lot of different story points and types of scenes and all that on these magnetic business cards. The trick is, though, they
Very
come in business card
crafty.
format. Yeah,
Very
I
crafty.
had
That's a great tip.
to buy a paper slicer and slice all of those that you see into their individual pieces. I cut myself a lot. It was a tremendous amount of time. I probably put 80 hours into making these magnets, but I love them. You'll see in the green there, those are story types. Like what type of scene that is being written in that chapter. For instance, like a lay of the land chapter, or a shocker, a twister chapter, or maybe, you know, something along an epiphany. And so whatever each chapter is doing, I put in green. The red ones are your energetic markers, such as when you reach a major point in the story, turning points, the point of no return, the darkest night. Those of you that are craft wonks out there sort of know what I'm talking about. But those are the big moments in the story that each story really should have to make it flow correctly. The most psychotic part is definitely my color-coded magnets. You'll see on the top left, there's different styles or different story factors that I'll have in the story. For instance, red in this one is figments. And so if you see a red square with writing on it anywhere on the board, that means a figment plays a prominent role in that chapter, and I'll write on it what it is. And so the reason I do this, and I do blue with location, this particular book involved natural disasters, so you'll see the yellow little squares on that. And why I do that is I want to make sure I'm treating all my subplots with the equal attention that's necessary. And so I have this so I can actually visually look at a story and I can tell where it's weak. I can tell what plot I've ignored based on its lack of presence on my board, or I can say, hey, you're spending a lot of time on the subplot that maybe is unnecessary. And then I add notes as I see fit, all the way through until you get something like this. Now, many authors see this and they visibly cringe. They don't want any part of this. They think this is insane. They think this sucks all the fun out of writing. And I get that. I mean, they're wrong and they're doing everything wrong, but I respect their wrongness. But this is not the way. You do not have to do this kind of stuff to write a book. This is how I write a book. I like to be super hyper organized, and that's, you know, just my strategy. But again, completely unnecessary for anybody who saw that and threw up in their trash can, because they're like, I don't do that when I write a book. You don't have to. You can just write. It's just, this helps me write less drafts.
Well, Brendan, I wanted to let you know that Emily Williams said that her students love the Project Nemesis and the Darkdeep series. So you're obviously doing something right with that very complicated and thorough process that we saw. But Max Rao wants to know the original ending of Chrysalis. Can you tell us more about that? Is that a top secret?
So,
Do you know Max? Is he trying to out you?
Max, yeah, I believe I do know Max. I think that this is one of my fans who's been asking for this for a while. Hey, that is fair. I've dodged this question. It's fair that you've tracked me down on Facebook Live to ask me again. So the only way I can artfully answer this is my books are thrillers. They're fast-paced. They usually are read in 1 or 2, maybe 3 sittings, and they're really twist-based. I really try and surprise. I don't say you'll always like whether you I don't know that you're always going to like my book, but I like to say you're not going to guess how it's going to end. That's what I like to do. So in Chrysalis, I had 2 endings in mind, and they're both in the book. I can say that because I finished the book at the last chapter, and I sat on it, the series, and I sat on it, and I thought about it, and it ultimately didn't feel right for the tone of the series. So I went and I added an epilogue, which was not in the original draft, the original 3 or 4 drafts, and it changes the ending of the series entirely. So I can't say, you know, what it is, but I can say that, like, I felt the ending that made it to print was the right one. It met the spirit of the series better than the original one I did. I always ask people, like, go back and look and then tell me which would you have preferred, because one would leave things very differently than the other. But that's at the end of Chrysalis, so you have to read all the way through Nemesis and Genesis to get there. And again, they're dark, they're fun, they're wickedly humorous, and they've been described as a technological retelling of Lord of the Flies. So it's an interesting set of concepts that I wanted to explore. So hopefully people like them. And thanks, Max. I'm glad. Good to hear from you.
Well, he said, thanks so much for sharing. And he was sorry he kept asking, but I think you've made his day. So I do want to say we got a question from Dr. Reichs, who says, tell your fans your nickname. This has got to be.
I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna.
Okay.
I'm not gonna do. When I was little, my mother used to call me Brendy Buns. That's what she used to call me as a child, and it's scarring. It's not something that needs to be done to an impressionable young boy, but there it is. That's the household I basically raised myself. So people don't understand that is like I was the third child and the first boy child. So on the one hand, I had absolutely no rules whatsoever. I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, because no one particularly knew I was there. But on the other hand, yeah, there was a lot of meals that I would make myself. I always say this when I do Darkdeep presentations, but like kids out there that are watching, you guys don't understand. Like in the 80s, parents love their children like dramatically less than they do today because they let us do whatever we wanted. Like we didn't have rules, we didn't have curfews. We would just get up in the morning and leave, and you only had to be back by dark. It wasn't even like a time. It was like a literally like a light level outside. And as long as you beat dark, they didn't ask what you did all day or where you were because they did not care. They didn't want to know. Now, parents today love their children a lot more than 80s parents did. And so they generally like keep track of kids during the day, but we didn't have that problem. And so we really tried to incorporate that into the Darkdeep, that sort of like get your bike and go freedom that no longer exists in the world anymore, that all 80s kids, for those that are adults my age out there, would totally understand. They're all nodding like, oh yeah, my mom had no idea what I was doing all day and did not care either, you know.
Yeah, we played in the woods all day long, and eventually you came home.
Yeah, just be home. That was it. Just be home. That was my only rule.
So I know that you spend a lot of time, and I know students and teachers are so grateful. Librarians are grateful because you've been in our libraries a lot too. You spend a lot of time talking with kids about your books and about writing. So we're always kind of curious. What are the great questions that kids ask you? What are the crazy questions that you get from kids?
Well, almost inevitably, the kids will ask me how much money you make, which is hilarious. Which we do not. It's just like they're always like, "How much money do you make?" And I'm just like, "I do okay." But in terms of questions that they ask, the older kids always want to know about writing. There's a lot of pressure on high schoolers now to believe like if I don't have a manuscript with a publisher by the age 17, I've missed the window, which is insane. To which I'm always like, I didn't write my first word of fiction until I was 28 years old. So there's absolutely no early barrier to entry. It doesn't help. Now, I think writing is about reps. Like your third book's going to be better than your first. And that goes with manuscripts. So I think the earlier you can start writing of any kind, whether it's like, journaling or working for the school paper or writing short stories or even like aggressive, Instagramming, it doesn't really matter if you're writing a lot. I think that makes you a better writer. But I always say that, like, don't put pressure on yourself at first, when you're getting it. Then that's also kind of translates to the best writing advice I've gotten as a professional when I was young. The older people would say, hey, never get too high and never get too low, because that's what writing is like. It's a business of rejection. It's a business of putting your stuff out there and having people judge it. And that can be really, really scary. But, it's also really rewarding when you do get the fan mail and when you do get emails. Like, that's one of the things that I love best is opening up an email to somebody who liked my series enough that they bothered to go to my website and hit the contact button and write me an email telling me about the series. So, that's the most gratifying. So it's the scariest part, but it's also the best part.
Yeah. Well, it has been such a pleasure to have you with us tonight, Brendan. We know you're staying busy there in quarantine mode since you've got your writing face on for us of working
That's
on
right.
lots of, I think you said, many projects are in the works. So your fans will just have to hang on a little bit. When's your next book coming out? Can you tell us that?
Yes, the Torchbearers will be my next release. It will be, I believe, September 29, 2020. So this
Okay.
fall, we're planning an aggressive national tour, a 3-week national tour, should national tours exist in the fall. Unclear whether that will be the case or not, but we're really excited about bringing the middle grade book to its audience. It's just a lot of fun to go. It's a new and unique and very rewarding experience to go into middle schools and elementary schools to talk to students because the kids aren't jaded yet. So like when I go do my high school presentation, they're like, oh, great, author guy. And I'm like, I'm going to win this. I'm going to make you like me by the end of this. But in middle schools and elementary schools, they just give it to you. They just like, oh, author guy is cool. And they mean it. So it's a lot of fun working with that age group. It's been a really, really refreshing change of pace and I enjoy it. But my roots are in YA and I'm getting back to that. And I'm excited to get new stuff out there.
Cool. Okay, we're going to leave you with this one last question, which is from Helen Kimbrough, who asked, what book did you read over and over as a child? Or I guess, did you have a favorite book as a child?
Yes, so it's my favorite book as a kid. So there's two parts to this question. I was a non-reader in fourth grade, didn't read, refused to. My father forced me to read The Hobbit with him, and he would do it on a nightly basis. And I started off with like pretending to sleep, and I'm like, I'm not listening, whatever. And then I was like, fine, and it was a real Princess Bride kind of thing. By the end of it, I was like, you can read another chapter, whatever. And I actually wrote my college essay on this. One day, I actually pretended to be sick, skipped school, and finished the entire book by myself. But the thing was, that was a singular experience to me. I thought, oh, The Hobbit is a good book, but books still are terrible. And so it wasn't until I read the next book, which was my mother had purchased for me. It was called The Dragon Bone Chair by Tad Williams. And I loved that book. I still love that book more than I can possibly describe. I've read it 20, 25 times. It's an epic fantasy in the traditional sense, but it is absolutely fantastic. And that was the book where I was like, oh, wait, lots of books are awesome. Books in general are awesome. It's not just The Hobbit. There's other stuff that's cool to read. And so after that, I read everything. I've read epic fantasy was my touchstone, but then I moved into thrillers. I really like and pretty much anything that's plot based is more my speed. So, but the Dragonbone Chair I recommend to anybody. It's just really, really one of the highest forms of epic fantasy ever written.
Great. Well, we love those new tip there for some book recommendations as well. So again, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining this evening. We could tell we had lots of folks that are listening in and watching and have given lots of great shout outs to Brenda tonight. So we really, really appreciate everybody joining in. I want to remind you again that you can go to cmlibrary.org and you can download lots of digital copies, ebooks of Brendan's books. So when we're all at home sheltering in place and you need something great to read, we hope you'll check out one of Brendan's mini books. If you haven't started the Viral series yet, or Project Nemesis, or the Darkdeep series, you've got lots to choose from. Also, we hope that you will continue to join us on Tuesdays and Thursday nights and invite your friends. We've got a great lineup over the next 4 weeks. On Thursday night, Marty Smith, ESPN commentator, will be with us. Next week, we have the co-authors of a new book coming out by UNC Press called UNC A to Z. So you Carolina fans out there, you'll want to join us for that. And then also next Thursday, we've got Karen Slaughter is going to be joining us. And then the following week, Leslie Hooten will be joining us, whom I believe she's a Charlotte writer. And I believe, if I remember this correctly, that this is her first book coming out. And so she was so pleased to finally be a published author at the age of 60. So just a little shout out to those of us who might still want to be writing. It's never too late. So we look forward to all those great authors coming up. And again, we hope you'll join us over these next few weeks. The last thing I want to leave you with is next week is National Library Week. And I hope many of you are really enjoying and using your library now more than ever. We've got lots of digital programs and services. You can even book a librarian, many things going on. So next week is National Library Week. And if you are enjoying and using your library, and if you're in a position to do so, we certainly hope that you will consider supporting your library during National Library Week next week. You can go to the Foundation's website and find out more about how to support the library, as well as sign up for a mailing list to keep in touch with all that we have going on. So a big shout out again to Brendan for being with us, for playing along on Final Draft Home Edition. We've had a lot of fun with you. Thanks for your awesome energy. And Brindy Buns, we might start calling you that. Thanks for all you do around young adult literature. And we're going to check out YALLFEST and YALLWEST as well. So again, thanks for everything for tonight. Have a great week.